She's the homeschool mom that every homeschool mom wants to meet. You know what I'm saying? You know how like fan culture works, even within like weird Christian subcultures? Like she was the hip, cool homeschool mom back when all the homeschoolers were weird. And I'm telling you that because I know that because I was homeschooled in an era where like those stereotypes, yeah, very true. Now, of course, there's tons of cool homeschool people that are like the coolest, hippest, like most easy to talk to, hang out with. But like when I was getting homeschooled in the early 90s, I'll tell you there's some weird families and kids and moms and dads, okay? Well, Heidi St. John was cool and hip when everyone was weird. She's raised dragon slayers with her husband, Jay. She's a best-selling author, sought-after speaker, and she's done all of this like in the state of Washington. Yeah, I know you think Canada is like America's evil top hat, but like, does it get worse than Washington? I don't know about that. Heidi St. John joins the show today to discuss education, cultural Marxism, parenting, discipleship, pro-life, what the new administration can do about education. And I think she might even sell everyone on homeschooling their kids. Buckle up. You're going to enjoy this conversation, and I hope you share it widely. Welcome to the Seth Gruber Show. Heidi, welcome to the Seth Gruber Show, finally.
Finally. Oh, my word. We're like two ships in the night. We have to run into each other at the Atlanta airport to get it on the books. Whatever.
I feel so bad. I think you've had me on like 3 times since we met during the middle of the scamdemic. I do feel bad. I forgot to put in the introduction and host of the Heidi St. John podcast, previously called Off the Bench. Millions and millions of downloads. Always get great comments from when I'm on Heidi St. John's show. So for people who don't know you, Heidi, because you got the public school Christians, you got the classical Christian school Christians, and then you got the homeschool Christians. For people who don't know you and maybe they're not familiar with kind of your ministry and your calling and your voice, tell us, who is Heidi St. John?
Well, I first, the most important thing I want people to know about me is I'm Jay St. John's wife. We just celebrated our 35th anniversary. We have 7 children and soon to have 8 grandchildren. It did not take us long to eclipse our children with grandchildren. So excited about that. I'm the author of 10 books, soon to be 12 books. I'm working on a couple of projects right now. And we are the founders and executive directors of the nation's largest homeschool resource center, an idea that we had many, many years ago. We planted over 100 homeschool cooperatives around the United States. I am very interested in the intersection of faith and culture, really believing that Christians who, we took ourselves out of the conversation around faith and culture, right? We decided, we don't talk about that stuff. Christians don't talk about politics. We don't wade into that stuff. Well, I do. I wade into all that stuff, and I think that Christians should have a voice in it. I don't understand why we got out of politics. When did Christians decide they didn't want to be in the policy shaping business? It makes no sense to me at all. And so about 10 years ago, I started the Heidi St. John podcast. And it's my passion. I love speaking to these issues. I'm kind of a no holds barred speaker, and like you, very, very passionate to see godly principles return to the nation, and that's going to depend on the children of God, honestly.
Yep, that's good. Well, I've always, not always said, but I've always believed and been saying recently, Heidi, that the what you just said, policy making, kingdom building, law crafting, these sorts of things, it's really just an extension of the cultural mandate, actually. Which is, by the way, the first commandment ever given. To be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. What does subdue mean, Heidi? What does that mean?
Oh, they were kidding, Seth. They didn't mean subdue. They meant fill the earth and build churches and stay in them. That's what that actually meant. And it must be what it meant, because that's what the church has been doing, right? Building churches and staying in them. But I believe, as I know you do too, we are called outside of the 4 walls of our churches to impact the culture. The only real agent of change that will ever impact the culture is Jesus Christ. And it's the power of the Holy Spirit at work through his people who were literally born for this time in human history. right? I mean, we were born for this. And just like Esther was born for her time, we were born for our time. And our time,
Yep.
we are being faced right now with some of the most important issues of our generation. I think of past generations. We have an opportunity to see abortion be eradicated from the culture here in the United States of America. We have a chance to tear down a system of education as godless and is injuring our children. We have an opportunity to do that. The question is whether or not God's people will get off the bench and onto the battlefield. And so I see my role, and I think I would put you in this category as well, is we're kind of the catalyst to say, hey, get off your rear end and engage in the battle. God's people are needed right now, probably more than ever. I think I just told you, Walt Hires here at the Homeschool Resource Center right now. He just finished about an hour and a half long-form interview with me. That guy is straight fire, 84 years old, flying across the country, talking about what which is a made-up thing, right? There's no such thing as a transgender. You cannot be transgender, either male or you're female, or they give you hormones and chop off body parts, but you're not a transgender. It doesn't actually exist. So to hear him at 84 years old talk about how he was roped into this culture in 1944, no one's going to tell me that this is a new phenomenon. It's not new. It turns out the enemy's been around for a long time, and we gotta, I mean, I'm a dragon slayer, let's go. Come on. We were born for this. Let's go.
Yep. So, I've been at the Homeschool Resource Center. It's very amazing. You now have a new facility. People have moved, guys, from all around the country to, is it Battleground?
It's Vancouver, just Vancouver.
Vancouver, yeah. Mm-hmm. People have moved from all across the country to Vancouver, Washington, actually to be part of your Homeschool Resource Center. It's actually become that attractive to people. That they want to build their lives and their families around it. It's very, very cool. But were you always the homeschool apologist, kind of mama bear, dragon slayer that you are now? And so, tell us about, everyone associates you with kind of the homeschool mom, right?
Yeah.
I think you've written books where you've used that phrase. So was that always the case? Did you always believe that parents need to pull their children out of public school and homeschool them and take really the lead in their children's education? But first, we want to thank our sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show, Every Life Diaper Company. EveryLife.com. This is where people who don't want to kill babies should be getting their wipes, their diapers, and they've got baby washes and shampoos now too. Okay, I know the people who run it. The CEO and founders are incredible people. They're friends of mine and my wife. We've done ministry together. We've labored together. They're incredible people. And they are providing a solution to our culture war, which is that woke capitalism is at the sort of tip of the spear of destroying our culture. These woke major corporations and companies who fund everything that you hate and then deride you in your values. Almost every major diaper company or baby brand leans or is openly pro-abortion. So the companies that provide products for babies are like champions of killing babies. Make it make sense. We have to fight back with our wallets. And at the Seth Gruber Show and the White Rose Resistance, we encourage you to do that. We do that ourselves. So get your baby wipes and diapers and baby needs from Every Life Diaper Company. Go to everylife.com, promo code Seth10, Seth10 for 10% off your first order. Let them know that we sent you. Everylife.com, promo code Seth10. And tell your friends, family members, and your nursery at your church to make sure they get their diapers from everylife.com. Thank you guys for being a sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show.
Yeah, no. And honestly, I would say I didn't become a true homeschool apologist until probably about, 8 years ago. I've always believed, especially since we pulled our daughter out of public school. So we've been homeschooling now for 25 years. But I never planned on homeschooling our kids. In fact, everyone I knew, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but everybody that I knew back in the late 80s and the early 90s that were homeschooling their kids, because these guys I thought everybody was just super weird. Like if you didn't have, like a denim jumper and you weren't growing your own wheat and grinding it into flour in your kitchen, I was eating like ho-hos and existing on Honey Nut Cheerios and Lucky Charms.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wasn't exactly your definition of a crunchy mom. And I went. My husband went to a public school. He had a good experience there in a little tiny town in northern Washington. I went to a Christian school. Interestingly enough, I grew up in a very, very unhappy home, and the Christian school, I think, in a lot of ways, the Lord used it really to save my life in many, many ways. So I was very thankful for my Christian education, and it was my grandparents who, when I was very young, because they paid for us to be in this Christian school. My grandmother was like, there's no such thing as a neutral education. Well, at 14 years old, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but okay, thanks for the free ride to Christian school, right?
Yeah.
As I got older, I realized, oh, hey, the stakes are a lot higher than I imagined they would be. But I never set out to homeschool our kids. Seth, I could not imagine why would a woman in her right mind take her, have her kids around her when a yellow bus come take away for free. Right. I mean, 5 days a week, you got a chance to go to the grocery store by yourself. You're getting a shower alone. It's amazing. Right. But when the Lord really put it on our heart to homeschool our kids, and it was just a series of events as God does, right, to kind of steer us around to his way of thinking. Once we pulled Savannah out of the public school in the second grade, God did such a work in our family. It was, aside from introducing our kids to Jesus, the best decision we've ever made is to divorce ourselves from the public school. And this was 25 years ago. They're way far gone now. I mean, we were having issues back then, but nothing like what's happening now. So I became, I think, more of an apologist, if you will, for homeschooling when I started seeing the radical sex education that's being pushed to our children, which precipitated me going before the legislative bodies here in Washington State, going to school. I mean, I was going to school board meetings before it was cool. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I love you. That's amazing.
Yeah. And so now, and just trying to expose this stuff, my kids weren't even in the system. And I was going to curriculum review board meetings, and I was saying, hey, I'd like everyone in the room to turn to page 172 so we can all see what the state of Washington says is birth control. Clearly not birth control, but a very unsafe sexual practice that hurts women. And so that has really turned me, because now I think the public schools are actually injuring children. 15 years ago, I was too naive to see it. I think it was still happening, but I think I was too naive to see it. And now I'm just like, the barn is burning. The Titanic is sinking. At what point do you get your kids off the ship? Get them out.
Yep. Was there a moment for you and your family where you realized you couldn't put your kids or keep them in public school?
We had an opportunity to put our kids in a Christian school. When my husband moved from he wasn't alone. We were all with him. When we all moved from northern Washington down to southwest Washington State, where he took a job at a Calvary Chapel, they had a Christian school. And part of the perk of working for the church was that you got free tuition for the school. And so I was like, this is great. I've hit the lottery. I'm not going to homeschool anymore. At that point, I think we'd been homeschooling for about 3 years or 4 years. But I went to register our kids in the Christian school, and I realized I couldn't do it because I had gotten to where I saw the power in it, and our family was so much more cohesive than it had ever been. And even though it would have been free and in a better environment certainly than the public school, that's when I realized, okay, we're hardcore homeschoolers.
Nice.
I had this opportunity to stick them in a private Christian school for free, and we turned it down because the formative years of our children's lives, you don't get a do-over. Yeah. And when we put our kids in school, even if it's a Christian school, and I'm not anti-Christian school, I mean, certainly it's a better option than the public school. Yeah. But we're still giving away to someone else the very best hours of our kids' days and the very best years of their lives. Those days that we have with our kids go by very, very fast. I mean, almost all 7 of our kids now are grown. We've only got Sailor at home. Yeah. And I can't believe it. I really can't. I can't believe it. I can't believe I have a 33-year-old daughter who has 5 kids of her own. Like, when did that happen? Yeah. And so I wouldn't change it for anything. And all of our grandkids are being homeschooled.
Yeah, that's amazing. So one of the things that I always found interesting with people who kind of had a little bit of condescension in regards to the homeschoolers.
Yeah.
Put the socially awkward stereotypes aside. is just the attitude of, I can't do that, or that's too difficult, or, what do you have against the public schools? That's a better social scene. That's how kids are going to get to know one another. That's how they're going to flourish. That's how they're going to develop emotional intelligence, relational equity, da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always found strange about that, I guess it's just how quickly we become accustomed to what is our norm. But like the history of education, if you want to treat education as, I don't know, let's just take it as like a 2,000-year blob. I mean, I guess we could treat it for all of human history. But isn't really the plurality and the majority of the history of education just homeschooling? Can you talk about that and like why, like, you're espousing what was the norm for most of human history?
Well, early American schooling was dominated by homeschooling. I mean, the early American culture, along with this like vibrant free market idea, it was an education ecosystem. And outside of education at home, this is, kids were learning how to run their own business. They were working on the farms. But kids learned to read at home. You talk to a mother today who has a 7-year-old child, and she freaks out at the idea that you would teach your own child to read. But in the early America that we now know was dominated by homeschooling, this was the norm. So many of our founding fathers, I mean, think about it, James Madison, George Washington, Andrew Jackson, John Adams, John Quincy Adams, just to name a few, like the broader population, got most of their basic education at home, and even poor kids got a formal education because the church and philanthropists took it upon themselves. The Quakers, for example, they ran schools that welcomed anyone, whether they could pay or not. Tax-funded government schools, especially like they exist today, would have been absolutely inconceivable to Americans in the 1600s to the mid-1800s. And education without the Bible and education without God, not only inconceivable, but they would have considered it to be an absolute oxymoron. They would have considered it to be outrageous. And so long before the government seized control of our education system, Americans were incredibly well educated. I mean, this is where we got incredible books, the Federalist Papers. They came out of this era, right? Now we've got kids who can't read. They can't pass basic exams to get into college. We've got kids who, they can't read or write or do basic arithmetic, but they can tell you how many genders there are. Right.
Yep.
No,
that's right. Yeah.
It's so turned on its head because this ambitious lawyer turned politician turned educational reformer, Horace Mann, with almost no experience as an educator, came on the scene. This guy, Horace Mann, a socialist, and he had delusions of restructuring the entire education system in the United States, and he succeeded. And here we are.
What year was that?
Oh, man, this would have been Horace Mann. Gosh, this would have been 1800. But I think you have to go back. And this is what I always tell people, to really understand the story of education, you got to go back to a long forgotten communist commune in Indiana. If people can look this stuff up, this is like the true history of education. So this commune in Indiana called New Harmony, and the guy who founded it, his name was Robert Owen. So this guy was a Welsh utopian. He rejected Christianity. He rejected the laws of private property, things that were very important.
Shocker.
Yeah, very important to Americans, right? The United States was like, dude, we're founded on this stuff. He hated it. Yeah. He also rejected Christianity. And so in 1825, he buys this entire town, right? This guy who rejects private property, I just think we should all pause to think about that for a second. He doesn't want you to own any private property, but he bought himself an entire town. And he renamed it rather, New Harmony. So this is supposed to show the world that collectivism is superior to individualism. And it's basically a giant communist experiment, right? And so everybody knows within just a few short years, this is going to be a total failure. And so even though his experiment failed, his socialist ideas had taken root in the United States. And this guy was absolutely fixated on education. So we're talking the 1800s, right? Wow. So listen to what he said. This is a quote from Robert Owen. He said, "To train and educate the rising generation will be at all times the first object of society, to which every other will be subordinate." So this guy fixated, just like Karl Marx, fixated on education. Karl Marx would come decades later, of course, and everybody who believed Robert Owens that government schools should take over the child rearing, Karl Marx just took that to the next level. right? And so now you got Marxism, which we have cultural Marxism in our schools right now. But contrary to scripture,
Well, I mean,
Owen, these
Wikipedia
guys,
tells
they didn't
me
think
that's
anybody was even sinful.
Wikipedia tells me that's a conspiracy theory. There's no
Right.
such thing as cultural Marxism, Heidi.
Right. Right. Well, obviously, you know, Wikipedia, they're going to say that because they are a Marxist.
So, Robert Owen, this is like the 1820s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. Yep. And so Owen then he meets a guy named Orestes Brownson, and together, you know, and I would say you would call Orestes Brownson was like the Barack Obama of his time. We would say he was a member of the cultural elite. Right.
Yeah,
These
sure.
guys who thought they knew better than everybody else. This guy was like a New England writer and editor, and he became just absolutely fixated on this idea that children are the property of the state. And this guy has money, you know, and so he comes along and he's just like, listen, we need to encourage parents to send their kids to the state to be educated. And his whole goal was to remove religion from education. So first, we tell the parents, you can't do it. You're too stupid. Then we tell them, not only are you too stupid and you can't do it, but also you're a fanatic because you're religious. And so the goal was to get rid of Christianity. And this guy wrote books on it. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So this has been happening since the 1800s. And and we've been just in this massive downward spiral ever since then. And when people understand where these guys came from, Horace Mann, who of course follows in the mid 1800s, he believed that education was he called it, what did he say? The only political safety. They understood.
A heck of an admission.
Yeah, they understood the power of education. And we're so naive in this country and in this culture now. And I would have put myself in this, you know, up until 10 years ago or so. We just didn't understand that education's not neutral. We just thought, it's reading, writing, and arithmetic. It doesn't matter. These guys knew different. And they founded the education because they understood the power of education.
Wow.
That's why they did it.
So you're saying that you to really understand the crisis that we're in our country and in our culture, particularly as it pertains to the next generation and education. A lot of this doesn't go back to just like John Dewey. A lot of this goes back a lot further than that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Orestes Brownson, you know, all these guys, Robert Owen, they were the ones who influenced John Dewey. They influenced Horace Mann. Horace Mann came before John Dewey. Most people would consider him to be the founder of America's government education system as it exists today. He was the guy that led to the Department of Education's founding in 1979, which, by the way, was never a part of the Founding Fathers' dream for America. We were never supposed to federalize our education system. And so we're outside of our jurisdiction.
Of course. Yeah.
And we're funneling through the education system ideas that are absolutely contrary to the founding of the country. And so you wonder, well, how do we get so messed up? Well, it's education, right? We are cranking out, Seth, by the hundreds of thousands every single year from our public school system. I mean, every June, we graduate hundreds of thousands of kids from our public school system who hate the country.
Yep.
They hate the country. And then where is that going to be the next time we have an election? These kids are going to be running for office. They're going to be voting. That is a deluge of kids who believe the Communist Manifesto. It's frightening, and we should be frightened about it.
It's secular discipleship,
100%.
And that's why, by the way, I mean, media plays a role in this, of course. Hollywood plays a role in this. I get that. But what you're saying, that's the primary reason why every 4 years, it seems like America's more progressive.
Yep.
More leftist. It's because we're graduating a new generation of voters.
Yep.
Who believe nonsense.
Yeah.
By the way, this whole thing too is fascinating history you're providing. The Emperor Diocletian from like 284 would actually kidnap the children of Christians, indoctrinate them, raise them, and turn them into brutish warriors who would then later persecute and kill their own Christian parents.
Yeah.
But they had no idea.
Well, isn't that happening now? How many?
That's
Seth,
what I'm. That's where I was going. But please pick it up.
How many parents do we know today who are like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
We were going to church. We were doing just fine. And then one day I realized my kid doesn't share my values. He thinks I'm stupid. We don't believe the same things. He's not going to church anymore. He doesn't value the family. It's because we've sent our kids for 13 years from kindergarten through 12th grade. We send them to Rome for an education. And then they come out as Romans and we're scratching our heads going, well, what happened? It's because we bought the lie that education was neutral.
Yeah,
it's anything but neutral. There's a reason why the sexual activists are targeting children.
That's right.
These young children, I mean, I just told you, Walt Heyer was in my studio today, and we were talking about the history of the so-called transgenderment, which, by the way, that's a lie on its face, because there's no such thing as transgenderism. No one is transgender. You can't be trans, biologically impossible. And so it's a lie. The terminology is a lie. But you send a 5-year-old to the school district in Ridgefield, Washington, and they're going to be shown a chart called the genderbread man, right? So this happens when they're 5 years old. These kids, they're not confused.
Wild.
But by the time they get to 3rd grade, they sure are confused. By the time they get to 7th grade, they couldn't tell you what a woman is, because they've just spent the last 5 years being indoctrinated into a sexual ideology that comes from the radical left, which was really planted in, it's rooted in Marxism. It's all of these things. I mean, they're all connected. And we have to intentionally injure children.
Queer theory,
100%.
Critical race theory. It's all different iterations of cultural Marxism.
Yeah, they're all branches of the same tree. And the only way that I think we get around this now, I mean, this tree needs to be destroyed, branch and root. You can't leave any vestige of it standing. And we have an opportunity, the Lord, for whatever reason, has chosen mercy over judgment in our country for a moment in time. We have a moment, and we dare not waste it. We got to start telling the truth, because right now you can tell the truth and not be persecuted. When Joe Biden is in office, you tell the truth, they shut you down. And we saw this. I mean, honestly, Seth, you and I saw this in COVID. You were on my show several times in the middle of that stupidity, right? And you see the lack of critical thinking in our country right now, where they can put a sticker on the floor in Walmart with a little arrow that tells you, go this way, stand here, 6 feet apart. Well, then we heard Father Fauci, the high priest of the Branch Covidians, tell us that sticker meant absolutely nothing. They were just guessing. It was just a number that they threw out there. And what do we all do? Where do you want us to stand?
Yep.
No critical thinking, because we're not taught to think anymore.
Yep.
The founding fathers were taught to think.
Respond to this phrase, Heidi. I don't want to teach my kids what to think. I just want to teach them how to think.
Well, we want to.
When our kids, phrase, but what do you think?
It too. When our kids are little, we are actually instructed, train up a child in the way he should go. Yeah. And when you're doing that, you are teaching them 2 things simultaneously. You're teaching them how to think. We think according to the Word of God. And you're teaching them what to think. Murder, for example, is wrong. Yeah. We are teaching our children what to think. And so all these ideologues who would tell you that they would never teach their children what to think, that's teaching them what to think.
Yeah, exactly.
You're teaching them there's no such thing as absolute truth when you're telling them that you're not going to teach them what to. So it's stupid. It's the whole, it's circular reasoning.
It's one of my biggest pet peeves, Heidi. And yet I've heard, listen, I'm a big fan of Ron DeSantis, but I've actually heard him use that phrase. Conservatives now use that phrase, Heidi, and they think they're being refined. They think they're being nuanced, and they go, education shouldn't be indoctrination. No, all education is indoctrination.
That's right.
Education shouldn't be about teaching kids what to think. We don't want that. It should just teach them how to think. But you can't teach someone how to think about morality unless you teach them the what, that killing innocent human beings is wrong and raping your girlfriend is disgusting. You can't teach someone how to think about algebra until you teach them the what, that 2 and 2 will always make 4.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no how without
together,
what.
Right.
It's so frustrating.
And you're not just teaching them.
What I'm saying is I'm adding more proof to your claim, which I completely agree with, by the way, that education is not neutral.
No. And it never has been.
Someone's worldview, someone's opinions are going to be elevated and others are going to be ignored. There's only
Right.
so much time in a semester. There's only so much time in a school year. What kind of books are you going to teach? Are you going to do Howard Zinn's history, or are you going to do David Barton's history? I mean, like,
Right.
values are going to be communicated either way.
Yeah.
The inability of the conservative movement today, Heidi, to grasp that. I mean, what did Bill Buckley call it? The superstitions of academic freedom.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and if you think about how much we have lost in the last 50 years because of the erosion of critical thinking in our country. You think about the damage that the National Educators Association has done to a system of education that was rooted in corruption to begin with. And now it's just outright blatant injuring of children that's happening day in and day out. So no one, when people come to me and they say, I can't do it, my response is, yes, you can. You just don't want to. Because if you want something bad enough, Seth, you figure it out. You figure it out.
So that's good. So isn't that what 2020 showed?
Yeah.
How painful and uncomfortable did a lot of Americans and parents' lives become because of the stay at home and just all the insanity, right? I mean, like, you couldn't go to school, and then when you did go back to school, the kids were miserable because they were having to wear the face diaper or 2 face diapers or 3 face diapers, and if you didn't wear it, some schools were quarantining kids in another area. Anyways, all of that, guess what happened to the homeschool numbers? Skyrocketed. I pulled up the numbers here because I wanted your response to this. This is insane. 2019, approximately 2.5 million students were homeschooled. 2024, 3.7 million.
Yeah.
So almost like over 1 million more increase.
Yeah.
We'd never seen increases like that. I mean, that's insane. So, so what would you say? I mean, I guess the question is, if half of American Christians who claim to be Christians started homeschooling tomorrow and using you as a resource and wall builders and other groups for curriculum, do we save Western civilization?
We absolutely do. I mean, you've heard Mike Ferris. I mean, it is possible, obviously, to homeschool your kids and fail at it. It is. It's possible to do that. And people will say to me, well, every system of education has its flaws. Yes, every system of education does have its flaws. But the great thing about homeschooling is it makes sure that the parent doesn't disengage from the child. So you understand what the kids are learning. Homeschooling doesn't mean that you teach everything by yourself, but it does mean that you understand who is teaching. Right. So if I pick a tutor for math or science or whatever for my kids, which I was absolutely prone to do, especially when they got into junior high and high school. Listen, I dissected one animal on my kitchen counter when Savannah and Sierra were like end of junior high. And I'm like, yep, Heidi's out. I'm not doing that. Over and out. So we found a great science teacher and my kids all went to her. But the reality is, once you understand that the biblical mandate is for parents to be in charge of their kids' education. Once you understand the power of education, to me, it is irresponsible and negligent and even disobedient to not take a close enough look at that. So most parents they have no idea. You send your kid to the public school, they have no idea what they're being taught. In fact, Seth, you're going to love this story. So I did a video, and I think probably by the time this podcast airs, it'll be live. My sister, who in the video I call her my friend because I'm trying to give her a little bit of anonymity, but my sister, who has 2 children in Seaside High School in Oregon, her daughter came home the other day,
Oregon's
and
bad.
her oh my gosh, so her daughter comes home the other day. She's a freshman, so she's in freshman English. And the teacher opens the class by handing the kids a book called The Absolutely True Story of a Part-Time Indian by a guy named Alexis Sherman. Look this guy up. He's been accused of sexual predatory behavior by dozens of women. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He's also a massive race baiter. It's crazy, right? The stuff that he writes. Anyway, so this is the book that's in freshman English, right? They're not reading Longfellow. They're reading Alexis Sherman. So the teacher says, I like everybody to open up to, I can't remember what it is, the first chapter in the book. And she says this is her favorite part of the whole book. and she starts reading out loud to the children, and they're learning about sexual self-gratification.
Wow.
And the guy is explaining in detail why God gave him his thumbs and how he just thanks God for them. Because if someone could get an award in this particular thing, he would absolutely get it. I mean, it was just sickening. And my sister's daughter comes home from school and she says, "Mom, the teacher read this out loud." There's like 30 kids in the class. And they're kind of embarrassed. A lot of the kids have never heard this terminology, right? Because they're 14. Right. And my sister says, "Well, go ahead and read it to me. What could be so bad?" She starts reading it. And my sister's like, whoa, stop it. I don't want to actually hear that. I don't need that. They got her 10-year-old sister sitting in the backseat of the car,
Whoa.
while her 14-year-old sister is reading this garbage. So then they give her a replacement book. The principal emails my sister and says, "Hey," because she complains. He says, "Oh, hey, thank you so much for your interest in your daughter's education." Like this pompous, condescending jerk that he is, because they genuinely believe that the kids belong to them. And he just so telling the parent, "I so appreciate that this matters to you. But this book has been approved by the Oregon Department of Education, and we've been using it for many years. And this is why it's okay. And we're trying to teach kids to understand their identity as teens," which apparently includes masturbation. I mean, when are we going to actually teach conjugating verbs? When are we going to do that? When are we going to learn how to write a research paper instead of researching body parts? I'd really like to know. So they give my sister's daughter a pass to be excused while they read that book out loud, and they give her a book to replace it. That book is called Hearts Unbroken. You should look it up. You should look it up. The very first, so I write out to my friend Karen England, right? You know Karen. I text Karen England, and I'm like, "Karen, look what's happening to my niece." And she was like, "Oh, Heidi, I got you, girl." So she starts just Googling, FOIAing what's in Seaside High School.
Wow.
Pornography.
Right. Yep.
I mean, disgusting things that they are peddling to children. No wonder our kids are screwed up. When are we going to care enough about our kids to pull them out of these systems of education that are injuring them body, soul, mind, and spirit? That is up to the parents. Wow. And parents need to understand. You say, "Well, that's not in my school. I'm in Red, Tennessee." Yes, it is. Yes, it is. They're targeting Red Tennessee. Hey. Hate to break it to you, because they're hoping that Red Tennessee is going to be Black Tennessee before you know it. We're going to skip right past the blue and go straight to the black. That's what they're doing, and they're doing it through the education system. People need to wake up.
Yeah, that's helpful, because I've spent a lot of time on this show before and in the film and in my book, Heidi, talking about, comprehensive sexuality education and where it comes from and what was the goal. And
Alfred Kinsey and all these creeps. Yeah,
it all goes together. But some people, they think that, well, we don't have that kind of junk in our school. By the way, that's true. There are school districts around the country that don't have radical sexual libertinism, sex ed, health week curriculum. That's true. But they still have a lot of books like these. And so it's not,
in their
it's not part of
libraries.
it's not part of sex ed health week, but it's in the school libraries, and they're often books that are assigned in courses like English.
Right.
So
because it's literature, Seth. It's super important. Okay. It's super great literature. This is really important stuff that we're learning. Right. It matters.
It's a many headed beast. And I think it's important for people to realize that this is not just a Washington or Oregon or California or New York problem, that this is across the entire country.
Yeah. Yep. It absolutely
wild.
is. And I think people can go to Take Back the Classroom. That's Karen England's. If you guys don't believe me, go to takebacktheclassroom.org, and you can find all of the sexually explicit material that's in your kid's school, because it's absolutely there. One of the books that Karen pointed out to me that was in my sister's kids' library is called Trans Plus. It's like you open up the book and it's filled, like in the very beginning, it's filled with QR codes.
Yeah.
And the QR codes take these kids to straight up porn sites. But what's worse than that is that they're made to track what the kids are doing. So you give these third party, companies your kids' information. They track the websites that they're, and then they suggest other ones, and it becomes this deep, dark pit that these kids are into. I mean, parents need to be very, very aware of what their kids are watching. Never let your kid have a computer in their room at night anymore. You can't do it. And I people say, well, I'm sheltering, I'm being really careful. If you're leaving a computer in your kid's room at night, you're not being careful. I think parents need to understand that their kids are being deliberately targeted. And most of it is coming through our schools, but it's also in the medical community. It's everywhere, and until we get a handle on it, until we stand up, until pastors get the moral courage to talk about what's going on in our schools, instead of they're so afraid that they're going to offend the sitting member of the school board, that they won't call out the wickedness and the filth that's in the school. Yeah. That's a problem of moral courage right there. Yeah, and we've got a lot of that.
We call it testicular fortitude over here. But so Heidi, have the lefties and the commies just kind of left the homeschoolers alone over the last 3 or 4 decades that homeschool's kind of really risen and in the last 4 years really become popular? I'm sure that the radical left has really just been stoked to let that movement grow and kind of just leave it alone, right? I'm sure there's been no attempts to try to step in and kind of stunt that or control it or dictate what kind of curriculum. Like, tell us about kind of the battle over the minds of children and what happens when parents do begin to take back their children's education.
Well, I think because it's a spiritual battle, you're going to hear a lot of demons screaming. And we hear it through the likes of Elizabeth Bartholet at Harvard. Through their magazine a couple of years ago, she wrote about the dangers of home education. And some of these people, there's one guy, I can't think of his name right now, but he is a professor at the College of William and Mary, and he called actually for homeschooling to be illegal. And he believes that parents should not, you know what this is? It's a spiritual battle. They don't want their kids being raised with a Judeo-Christian worldview. They can't argue about the educational success. These kids are blowing their public school counterparts out of the water. They can't deny that it's not a social problem anymore. It used to be socialization. Oh, aren't you afraid your kids are going to be weird? I'm always like, yep. And that's exactly why I put my kids out of public school. Right. And so they can't argue from that angle anymore. And so they're taking direct aim at parents who are bringing their kids up with the Judeo-Christian worldview. They don't want their kids being raised with the values that are laid out in the Bible, which is odd to me. Don't murder, don't covet your neighbor's wife, don't steal. Oh, that's bad. Well, we can't do that. And so I think parents need to understand that that's what's actually happening, but they have found a backdoor way. So the attacks like what Elizabeth Bartholet did through Harvard are less common, although I think we're going to see them ramp up in the coming months because homeschooling has become so mainstream now, and it's a threat to their control. They have control because of the public school system. That's literally why. And so as it becomes a threat, you're going to see more and more backdoor entrances into the homeschool movement. And they're going to do it through things like vouchers and taxpayer-funded quote unquote homeschool programs. And I have been sounding the alarm on this for about 10 years. Listen, you cannot take government money and not expect government control. Once the camel gets his nose under the tent of your homeschool, he ain't backing out. And so parents would say to me, well, it's my money. Well, yeah, you're right. It is your money. And if you want your money back, then you should ask for it through tax incentives and credits like that. But the voucher systems literally invite government oversight. And they will. They've already started doing it in Washington State. They're doing it in Utah. There's several places around the United States right now that have these programs in place. And as soon as the homeschool parent signs up for them, guess what? You've got oversight now. And you can't use any of that money to buy, let's say you wanted to buy a science curriculum from Apologia. Well, that's a Christian company. You can't do that. So if you want to use their money, then you have to use their curriculum. That's the whole point, right? The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. So we better figure out who's rocking the cradle so that we can make sure that they're not teaching the little kid in the cradle anything we don't want him to teach, because eventually that kid's going to grow up and maybe not do what we want him to do. And that's what it is all about. It is all about control. Parents need to make sure they understand when you vote on these things, follow the money. Follow the money. Keep your homeschool free of government funding. It's a temptation, Seth, because our taxes are so high. But I say we elect people who will lower the taxes. That's not going to be the Democrats, by the way. They're the tax and spend party. And so there's, I think, some really significant battles ahead. But the battles are here because of the success of homeschooling. And so the good news is, as you rightly pointed out, and I actually think those numbers are low, the good news is that the homeschool movement has exploded, and there are millions of homeschooled kids whose parents are not just going to roll over and go, okay, I'll do what you want. They're not going to do that. Yeah. And so it's a huge voting block too. Yeah. And so they're going to be careful, they're also going to be very deceitful. And I think people need to watch the language in these bills. Follow like organizations like the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They unpack these bills all the time, and you can see what's coming at the homeschool movement in terms of legislation every day of the week and twice on Friday over at HSLDA.
By the way, if it's true that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, it's also true that the hand that wrecks the cradle ruins the world.
Yeah.
And that was sort of always the entire point, by the way. 2018, California attempted to pass AB 2756 to suggest reforms to the homeschool system. Could be home inspections and teacher credentialing and setting of curriculums. There you go. That was back in 2018, by the way, guys.
Yep.
What's the name of the group again? The Homeschool Legal Defense?
Yeah, it's in fairness, I sit on the board of that organization, but that was founded by Mike Ferris. The Homeschool Legal Defense Association, hslda.org. It's a membership organization. It's got to be, I think it is the largest homeschool organization in the world, but they full time, what all they do is keep their finger on the pulse of legislation that would threaten homeschool freedom. Yeah. And there are a lot of them. They're being suggested all the time. And in fact, I just did a show on this a couple of weeks ago with the president of HSLDA, with Jim Mason, talking about some of this legislation that's coming out now and how they're cloaking it so it doesn't actually look like what it is. And so people need to be very careful and be vigilant. The homeschool freedom in this country was hard won. And most people now don't remember when homeschooling was illegal. But I have friends.
That. How did that happen?
So in the 80s,
I don't know the history of that.
Yeah, it's actually pretty fascinating. In the 1980s, people started, late 70s, 1980s, people started, the homeschool movement was growing, really a resurgence because it's just coming back, right? We just talked about that. It used to be the homeschooling was the norm. Then you got ding-dongs like Horace Mann and John Dewey, and then it wasn't the norm. And there were people in the late 70s and early 80s who were like, you know what, we're going to bring our kids home. Well, they didn't have the freedom to homeschool because it wasn't written into the statutes anywhere. And so people actually, you could be arrested for truancy. My friend Zan Tyler, she'd be a great guest for you to have on the show. She was actually threatened with jail in South Carolina. In the late 80s because she wanted to homeschool her kids. And I think now homeschooling is legal in all 50 states thanks to people like Mike Ferris and Mike Smith who founded the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. But these freedoms can be taken away.
Yeah.
Yes, and they were truancy laws. There were all kinds of. Here's Zan, and she realizes I've got a child who needs special attention. And her dad was well invested in the legislature. She had powerful people that she knew who turned on her and were like, absolutely not. You cannot homeschool your kids. She has a very powerful story, and it's a cautionary
70s?
tale. In the 80s. This is the 80s. It wasn't that long ago. And so here we have, this freedom that has really been hard won. Cases that were argued before the courts, legislation that was passed. And like I said, homeschooling is legal now in all 50 states, but every state has different requirements. And we need to be vigilant to protect it, right? If we don't protect those freedoms, there are people that are just waiting, the second that you go to sleep at night and aren't watching what's going on anymore. And so watch what's going on in the news, because as homeschooling grows, the threats for homeschooling and toward it are going to grow as well.
Yeah, that's always how it works. I mean, anything that's a threat to the revolution,
right,
will find itself in the crosshairs of the revolution. I like how my friend Dr. Nancy Piercy puts this, Heidi. She says, central planners have always wanted to bring the family under greater government control so they can inculcate their own ideology into young minds and create docile citizens.
True. And we saw that in COVID. We just lived through it, right?
Yeah,
I mean, look at.
I wanted to ask you about. Do you remember over the last few years when Kamala Harris and Joe Biden on at least one occasion with each individual, when they were talking about America and they were talking about America's children, they said our children.
Yeah.
Do you remember these clips?
Oh, yeah, and they believe
Obama said those things, too. They refer to your children, but they say our children, meaning like I'm the vice president and, like America's children, like our children, like in America.
Right.
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. No, they do believe it. Well, that's Hillary Clinton. That's
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton's village, right?
Oh, it takes a village.
yeah,
Which, by
Hillary
the way,
Clinton-
it kind of does, but
Yeah,
not like
but
that's
not that village.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to pick the village. Okay, I don't want your
Yeah,
village.
yeah.
I've seen it. I'm not interested in
Because
that.
it does take a village. Like you want other voices in your children's life. It's just called the church. Like,
Right.
It's just called Christian community. Like you actually want other people involved in your family than only mom teaching kid. Like it's good to have Christian fellowship.
This is
not
why
like
the
some weird
Homeschool Resource
commune
Center-
crap where like you're living in the same home. That's not what I mean. But
No.
exactly, that's what you built in Vancouver.
That's what we built here. It was what I wished I would have had, 25 years ago. You come to the home. We have 1,200 students here right now.
Wow.
On any given day. I mean, there's hundreds of kids in over 230 classes that are being offered right now. Everything from the
way.
Constitution to crafting. We're bringing back the
Wow.
trades here. So automotive, woodworking, manufacturing.
Wow.
We are really trying
I
to
love
help
that.
parents round out their kids' education. Homeschooling doesn't mean you do it by yourself. That's it's such a misnomer. And so
Yeah.
here I call it kind of a choose your own adventure homeschooling. So if a mom comes to me and says, okay, my kid came home from the Ridgefield. This actually happened. My kid came home from the Ridgefield School District and the administrator, whoever it was, I don't know, put a litter box in the bathroom. Because now there's furries. And people are like, that's not happening. Yes, it is. Yeah, it is happening.
Wow.
I don't think that Ridgefield's doing that anymore. I think there was such an outcry. People are like, are you insane? And of course, the answer to that question is yes. I mean, obviously
Yes.
the answer. But so this woman, so let's say you pull your kid out of school and you say, I want to homeschool my kids, but man, I really want them to be in choir. And I love the dance program. And also, I don't want to teach algebra. Great. I have a dance program for you. I got a choir for you. And I've got an algebra tutor. When can we start? Right.
That's awesome.
And so what I'm trying to do is just remove every obstacle in the way of a parent that wants to homeschool their kids. And so we do everything from, we teach the Constitution here. We've got a chess club that just took first in state. And
Wow,
so
that's cool.
and it's a thriving community. There's a bookstore here and a coffee shop. So you come in here
I know,
and
I've been there. It's awesome.
you got this whole big, wait till you see the new one, dude. It's going to blow your mind. You have this whole wonderful community of people that are putting their families first. And so it's an ecosystem that is working. And also, we don't take a dime of government money, right? Because what the government gives its money to, the government has a voice in. I don't want the government. I'm paying enough in taxes, right? I'm certainly not going
that's
to
right.
take your money. You can just have my money. Just leave me alone, right? And so to me, if there were centers like this one, Seth, in every city in America, you'd see a revolution in the country. Because we're putting parents back in the driver's seat of their kids' education. It's parents who need to be deciding what is best for their kids, not the state and not the
That's
school.
really good. It takes a village. And I guess homeschoolers are saying, can I create the village?
Exactly.
And Hillary Clinton says, hell no.
That's exactly what she says. And they're not interested in your personal
Which,
freedom.
by the way, proves to you what Heidi and I have been trying to tell you guys this whole time, which is that education is not neutral.
Nope.
Like, that is such a perfect little vignette. Like, obviously, the Clintons and all the liberal establishment do not want to celebrate, support, and rally behind your right to create your village. When they
Right.
say it takes a village, that don't mean what you think it means.
Nope. No, it doesn't. And truly, these people understand the power of education, or they wouldn't be so invested in the National Education Association, one of the wicked, most evil and corrupt unions ever to exist in the United States. They're right up there with the National Library Association. You think your library is this sweet place where the little old ladies, stack the books after you return them to the bin? No. This is a Marxist organization that is literally pushing pornographic books to children and refuses to label them as such. You can't just take it's sad, Seth. You can't just take your kids to the library and just go, have a great day. Mom will be sitting over here in the corner. There's a little red wagon. You can't.
Why? Because ideas are powerful.
Yes.
And libraries are a representation of ideas.
Yes.
The
Yep.
schools are a representation of ideas. Why is it that those tend to be where the culture war is the hottest, the most intense, the most divisive? Because ideas have consequences.
That's right.
And bad ideas have victims, and education is not neutral. There's the summary of the show.
Yep.
Heidi, in closing, are you excited about the new administration that just that we just got? And what are your hopes for it? And what might they be able to do on this front so that we can take back education, parents can exercise more control in their children's lives? I mean, obviously, the answer is abolish the Department of Education. But if they're not successful in doing that, what are some other things?
Well, I think, yes. I mean, you can start with looking, how do we, at the very least, dismantle, if not
Yeah.
abolish, the Department of Education? It's going to be very hard. People think it's going to be easy to do. It is not going to be easy to do. Here in Washington State, I think we're one of the third. We get more money than the federal government than almost all the states. It's a lot of money. I don't have it in
Wow.
front of me, but it's astonishing. And so you know that people in Washington State will be screaming and yelling if they try, and they will. I mean, this is going to be a tough
Right.
fight. But I think what they can do, and I'm actually hoping to get an audience with the new Secretary of Education and talk about why these things are so important. Words matter. And they can make a statement where they say parents are the primary educators of their children. Parents, the school answers to parents, not the other way around. And there are lots of things that we can do to educate parents as to their responsibility. Seth, we have for generations now dropped our kids off, and Christians do it every day. We drop our kids off and we leave them, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 9 months out of every year in the care of people that we do not know. We don't know their worldview. Parents have the right to understand who is teaching their children. And they have the right to speak into what is being taught to children. And that has been systematically stripped away from them. And the Department of Education as it exists right now is corrupt and evil. And outside of just dismantling it, which you and I both agree that's what needs to happen, I think what they could do immediately is issue a statement saying, we believe in the United States that parents are the primary educators of their children. Parents are
Yeah.
the ones who choose whether or not their kids are going to be vaccinated. Parents are the ones who decide if their kids are going to be in comprehensive sex education and what books they do and don't want them to read. They can make those statements to remind parents who really have either forgotten or just never been taught that
Yeah.
they are the ones who ultimately have the right to direct the upbringing of their own children. Children are not a ward of the state. And that is what parents who send their kids to these schools tend to believe. They're made to believe it, right? And our
Yep.
kids are made to believe it. So the kids think, well, the teacher's got more authority than my mom does. And in many cases, that's true, right? Because we gave them that authority wrongly. So
Yeah.
I'm hopeful. I think President Trump is a huge proponent of home education. I'm hopeful that they give it a voice without giving it money.
Yeah.
We don't need your money. Keep your money. It's blood money. I don't want your money. How about you let me keep more of my money?
Yeah.
How about that? I mean, I think that's a better way to do it. But just to bring the importance of education to the forefront again, I'm already talking with some people in the Trump administration about this and praying that God gives me a voice and an opportunity to speak into it as a homeschooling mom, but also as a citizen who loves this country. You know me, Seth. I ran for Congress in 2022. I love this country. I think it's worth fighting for. And I think we have a real opportunity to reframe the conversation. And Trump cannot waste a second. And I think he understands that now. He surrounded himself with people who were unwise and ungodly in his first term. And I think what we need to be praying for as Christians is that he has true godly people around him, people who will listen to the sound of the Holy Spirit in their lives and will do what God would want them to do rather than please men. And we have an opportunity, and I hope Trump takes it. I really do. I think he will. I think he's going to hit the ground running.
Good. That's exciting. Good. Heidi St. John podcast, everyone, just tell people who are, just started homeschooling or want to homeschool or considering, maybe just like how to be encouraged and maybe some resources on their journey.
Well, I think the main thing that people need to know when they're first starting out homeschooling is that they don't need to know everything. You're going to learn right along with your children. Don't let the enemy lie to you. I remember, Seth, when I first discovered that I could teach my own kids to read. I was told that only college, you had to go to college to treat a kid to read, right? And I didn't have a college degree. And I've taught, 6 of my 7 kids to read using a book called Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. And Seth, it changed my worldview because I realized, these guys are lying to me. I can absolutely do this. Everyone knows that the teacher learns more than the student. And so when you homeschool your children, you become a student when you become a teacher, and you can grow right along with your
Yep.
children. So don't let the enemy lie to you about your worth and what you're capable of doing. If I could go back, 25 years ago, I would be a lot more, I hope I'd be more mellow. And I would
Yeah.
realize that education is a process. And I was worried because I was a first generation homeschooler, never done it before. I felt like I had to impress my parents and all these people that were watching. And I think I would be a little bit more laid back now.
Mm.
And reminding parents, and I think this might be the most important thing that I say in this entire show, when we do what God says to do, when we obey, when we give him our flawed personalities and our sinful desires, and we give it to the Lord, because we're going to make mistakes. Every parent makes mistakes. You're going to make mistakes with Seth. You're going to screw something up with your kids. You just are. We come before the Lord and we offer it up to him. And what God begins in our children through our desire to walk in, even when we don't do it perfectly, through our desire to walk with the Lord, God will finish what he has started. God will finish it. It's our job to walk in obedience and to give our children what God asks us to do. And then we trust the Lord with the outcome, and God will do it. And we need to trust that. And when I realize, oh, hey, it's not up to me to be the finisher, God's going to be the finisher, the pressure lessens quite a bit. And I think we focus on loving our kids. If I could go back and homeschool my kids, I would do it again every day of the week and twice on Sunday. I'd probably be a more mellow mom. I think I'd enjoy the time I had with my kids a little bit more, realizing how fast it goes. But I always tell people it'll be the hardest, best thing you ever do for your children is to keep them home with you. And it's a blessing, and it's a generational blessing. And in my family, the Lord has used homeschooling to break generational curses. I have seen him do incredible things in our marriage. And it's also sanctifying, right? It's going to drive you to your knees. I always tell moms, listen, if homeschooling hasn't driven you to your knees yet, you're doing it wrong,
Mm.
right?
Wow.
That's where God wants you. He says his mercies are new every morning, and he'll meet you there. Because at the end of the day, just like Seth with your ministry or with the Homeschool Resource Center or with our parenting and all the things that we do, God wants the glory.
Yep.
It has to be about him at the end of the day. I don't think God wants I don't think he wants any homeschooler to get to the end of your homeschool journey and say, well, I was amazing because I found a Becca. I found a Becca curriculum and then I incorporated it. No, I think, and this is what I have done, every time one of my kids graduates, just me and the Lord, like I get to the end of that journey and I fall flat on my face in my closet before the Lord, lift my hands to the heavens and say, thank you, Jesus. That was all you. Now you got to take it from here. And he'll do it. God wants the glory. And I think he sees that heart. And now, my kids are mostly graduated and I spend more time praying for them than I ever have. And I think that always continues. But parents need to know this is about the Lord. And when you make it about obedience and not about your performance as a parent, when you make it about discipleship and not about a discipline of academia, God really will fill in the gaps in your kids' because they will have gaps in their education. I had them and I went to a great Christian school. They will have gaps. God will fill them in. He can do it. And I can't, frankly, Seth, I can't wait to see what happens with this generation of kids who now are coming into adulthood themselves. And I think God's going to use it in a powerful way. And so parents can do it. They just need to know that God will help them.
Yeah. Amen. That's powerful. Good word. Heidi St. John, the busy mom, the top podcaster, speaker. And thank you, Heidi, for coming on the show today. Where can people connect with the Homeschool Center to learn more and follow you?
Yeah, they can find out more about Firmly Planted Family, which is the name of our nonprofit organization, by just going to firmlyplantedfamily.org and clicking on the Homeschool Resource Center. It's an amazing story of God's provision. It's worth watching. There's a great episode up there of the 700 Club interviewing us here at the center. Fantastic to watch. If people are interested in finding out more about me, they can go to the Heidi St. John podcast or just to HeidiSt.John.com. Everything I've done is there. And Seth, it's always a delight to see you. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Super fun, super fun. Guys, share this episode. That we covered so much ground. I think it'll be inspirational inspirational, educational, and convicting. Make sure you follow the Heidi St. John podcast. She talks about all the issues, and it's super, super fun. Head on over to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Give the show a rating and review. Okay, let us know what you think. If Rumble, you got to help me out. YouTube doesn't like me. I almost got completely digitally assassinated once with 2 strikes. So go subscribe at Rumble. Make sure you pick up a copy of the 1916 Project book. The Lying, the Witch, and the War We Are In, by the way, is the subtitle. Why would you not want to buy that? Host a screening of the film at your church or with a Christian school, and it will be streaming soon. We'll be announcing that hopefully first quarter of this year, where the 1916 Project is going to live and stream for the years to come, with DVDs coming soon. Don't worry. And if you want to become a part of the White Rose Resistance, go to thewhiterose.life and sign up as an ally or greater at $35 a month. We just went through Megan Basham's book, Shepherds for Sale, on our Books in the Barracks book club. That's $70 a month. That's the air support level. But pick a level, get your battle box, become a pro-life ninja, become a Gideon to tear down the high places with us. Until next week, I'm Seth Gruber, and this is The Seth Gruber Show.